Vpraša, da povem nekaj o Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati, ampak zdaj ne vem, kaj bo slovenščina, angliščina, hrvaščina, latinščina. Another brother asked that I say something more about Šrila Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Thakure, whose disappearance day anniversary was 2 days ago, so I don't know, Slovene, English, Croatian, Dalmatian, whichever language we choose, we're going to need some translation. So, English? Who wants English? Okay, who's alright with him? Who's alright with Slovene? Croatian? Dalmatian? Hindi, nahi. Bangla, Punjab, Telugu, Tamil, Telugu, Malayalam, Kannada. No. I know how to say Nandri in Telugu, in Tamil. English, Slovene. Angliščina, slovenščina, kaj bo? Karkoli da bo, rabimo prevod zorganizirati.
Kdo bi angliško prevajal? Kdo prevajal angliško?
Kdo bi prevajal iz angliščine v slovenščino ali hrvaščino?
Pa če bo pravo počas govoril, boš tako prevajal?
Ja, ne bom počas govoril. Ko će prevoditi Bhaktama koji ne... Krišna zna, Bhaktama ne zna sve jezike.
Onda učit će.
Moramo biti fair.
Da, fair play.
A kdo ne razume angliščino?
Ja ne razumijem.
Ok, ne razumeš englesno?
Ja 20%.
Ok, mislim da se za vas tri rabimo prevod. Kdo lahko prevaja iz angliščine v slovenščino ali v srpščino, hrvaščino? We're going to spend half a lecture deciding which language to speak in. Yes, okay, I can speak in English and then translate.
Oh no.
Into 3 different languages. English.
Google Translate.
Kdo bo prevajal? Mado, lahko ti prevajaš za par dva.
Kje je nasto? Nisem razumel, pa da se sprot prevaja po jaz to slabo znam slovenski. Nisem rečen slovenski.
Okay.
Da, English.
Okay, English. And it's going to be a short lecture, half an hour or less. So 2 days ago we celebrated, and we do celebrate, the disappearance anniversary, Tirobhavatiti in Sanskrit, or the anniversary of the death of the great saintly persons, because by their presence and teachings they have marked this world and blessed it. So Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Thakure, who was born Bimal Prasad Datta from Bengali parents, he was born in the 5th of February 1874 in Jagannath Puri, in the present state of Odisha in India. His father was Kedarnath Prasad Datta, who was the deputy magistrate, one of the handful of Indian deputy magistrates in British India, and who was also a great acharya, known as Bhaktivinoda Thakur. And Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati, as we know, he was Srila Prabhupada's spiritual master. I may speak about a few technical details. So, Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati was, I don't know, 4th, 5th, 6th child out of 11 or 12 children that Bhaktivinoda Thakur had. And he had 1 or 2 children with his first wife, who died young, right after giving birth, I think, to 1 child. And then his mother arranged that he marries again, and then with his second wife, whose name was Bhagavati Devi, he had another 10 children.
Oh,
Jai. You know, I know a devotee from Czech Republic who is one of 16 children, same father, same mother. 16. Well, our grandparents in these regions also had, you know, many children, or they were one of many children. I've heard a number, there was one sheikh in the Middle East who had a harem, number of wives, and he wanted to have a son, but he kept getting daughters. And he tried until he died, but he never got a son. He had more than 700 daughters. So Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati, he was a genius, a prodigy, since birth. When he was born, his umbilical cord was wrapped around his neck as a Brahmin thread, a sign of a great personality. And his father's house, while he served in Jagannath Puri as deputy magistrate, as well as the superintendent of Jagannath Puri temple, was right in the middle of a grand road, Badadanda, from Jagannath Puri temple, called also Shri Mandir, to Gundija temple. That's the road where Ratha Yatra goes every summer. And after a week back, so his house was somewhere in the first half or first third of the grand road on the left side when you go from Jagannath Puri temple. And when he was 5 months old, Ratha Yatra was passing in front of their house. And the chariot, you know, there are wooden chariots, and they have no brakes. They don't have the steering mechanism. Sometimes they stop and they don't want to move, sometimes they go fast, like that. But this time, as it happened sometimes in history with great personalities, this chariot stopped in front of their house and it didn't move for 3 days. It just couldn't move. People pulled and pulled and pulled and nothing happened. Then on the 3rd day, Bhagavati Devi came out with her little child and climbed on the chariot, and she paid obeisances in front of Lord Jagannath, and she placed her little child, Bimal Prasad, on the floor before Jagannath's feet to pay obeisances. At this moment, one of the flower garlands from Lord Jagannath fell on the child. And right there on the chariot, they had a ceremony called Anahut, or the first grain giving up until the 6th month of age. Child doesn't eat any grains. So they got Lord Jagannath's Mahaprasada and they fed the child right in front of Lord Jagannath. Then when they got off the chariot just moved on its own. As deputy magistrate, his father was moving around, plus being a great devotee, he slept for 4 hours a day, spent about half an hour eating. He was hyper-productive. Being a father of 11 children, deputy magistrate, moving around, he wrote 115 books and was published in 2 magazines, plus writing for others. His creative, theological, philosophical opus is, my God, you know, there are several PhD dissertations about him, but his son, Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati, I don't know who had greater writing opus between the two of them. There was definitely, you know, a competition. We have to check one day who wrote more. But Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati, when he was 7 years old, he had memorized the entire Bhagavad Gita in Sanskrit, Bengali translation, and he could give clear explanations of the verses. He was prodigy, a wunderkind, since he was born. His father trained him immediately in editing, in language, in philosophy, and then he studied in West Bengal, I think in Ranaghat, and then he studied in Sanskrit College in Kolkata. He studied Jyotish, Vedic horoscope, and he was proficient in it. He corrected the mistakes that crept in throughout the centuries, recalculated the positions of the planet, discovered one rare treatise on astronomy called Surya Siddhanta, translated it into Bengali and wrote the commentaries. He was writing articles on Jyotish for one Jyotish magazine called Jyotirvid, in Bengali, of course. In his later years, when he was already a Swami, a sannyasi, and a guru, he still didn't speak English. He did speak Sanskrit, Bengali, Hindi, most probably Oriya as well. But he didn't speak English. So some of his friends suggested, you know, we are ruled by the British, official language is English, why don't you learn English? So one day he decided, I'm going to learn English. So his disciples got him English grammar book for Bengali readers and a big thick Oxford English dictionary. And he read the grammar and he read the dictionary in 3 days. And after 3 days he spoke English fluently, academically, intellectually. So when you read his writings that he wrote originally in English, this is tough English to read. Tough English to read. He had a title, sometimes in the Western world, in ISKCON, he's mistakenly called Simha Guru, Lion Guru. The original Sanskrit title was Acharya Keshari, because he was strong. He didn't spare any philosophical deviation, concoction, nonsense. He would cut it, even if it meant that it created him some enemies. No, this is false, this is true, whatever nonsense you're talking, that's not correct. In his private dealings with his family members, his siblings, with his disciples, he was super sweet and soft. So when one of our ISKCON authors, Bhakti Swami, was writing a book about him, after 20 years of research, he wanted to give it the title Lion Guru, but then he changed it. And I asked him, why did you change it? He said, it was just one aspect of his personality. You would do injustice just by calling him by this name. In ISKCON we have some kind of a misconception about him that he was like, wow, strong. He was strong philosophically, theologically, but in personal dealings he was super sweet. Oh, what else can we say about him? He published 7 magazines throughout his life in 5 languages. Let's see. His father was publishing a magazine called Sajjana Toshani, and then stopped some years before he left this world. And then right after his father left this world, he resumed this Bengali magazine, Sajjana Toshani, from 1915 to 1927. And then he changed the language of the magazine to English and the title from Sajjana Toshani to The Harmonist. And this magazine was printed until a year after his disappearance. 2 issues were printed after he passed away. Then in 1922 he started a magazine in Bengali called Gaudiya, which was printed well after many years after he disappeared, and he wrote about 1,000 pages worth of articles for this magazine. About 10-15 years ago, one temple in India extracted, retyped all of these articles in Bengali and printed it as a 1,000 pages book in Bengali. There was a room full of texts that his disciples transcribed his lectures as he was speaking on the go, and his letters and his seminars and his instructions. And this was a room full of texts and one big thick volume of his biography. Second part. First part was published, but second part was with these papers. Unfortunately, after he left this world, two of his leading disciples left their allegiance to him, criticized him, and one of them, who had this entire library, burned it, destroyed an ocean. My God, you know, how many books he could publish with this, how many PhD dissertations could be known, how much more we would know about him. Oh my God, I'm working on a book right now, and one chapter is some of his sayings. For those who know Shiksha-staka, the song written by Lord Chaitanya. So I'm working on a book about Shiksha-staka and all of its commentaries. And there were several commentaries on that book, not many. But then Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati in particular quoted it a number of times and then gave additional explanations, some really esoteric. And I know he was giving seminars on Shiksha-staka, and this was all transcribed. And we would have hundreds of more pages of that nectar had they not been destroyed. The only thing from this library that remained were the original books that he used for his research, the books mainly in Sanskrit and Bengali, but not his own work, burned to the ground. So Sajjana Toshami, the harmonist, Gaudiya, then he started Nadia Prakash, which became daily newspaper for this entire district of West Bengal, the Nadia district. And it was published well after he left this world. Then there was, let me see, Paramarthi in Oriya, Bhagavat in Hindi, and Kirtana in Assamese. These 7 magazines he was publishing throughout his life. And then there was a whole list of books he was working on at the time of his disappearance from this world. My God, he published Vaishnava encyclopedia called Vaishnava Manjusha in 5 volumes, which was not done as a proper encyclopedia, but he collected a lot of data and he wanted to publish it, although it was not done high class, just so the future generations have this information in case he has to leave prematurely, and there are other volumes being ready to be made. He traveled incessantly for many years, for almost 20 years he traveled incessantly. For 10 years he was employed, in his youth he was employed by the king of Tripura, first as an editor for the book that his older brother was compiling, older brother of Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati. He was compiling the book about the history of the Tripura kings. Book was called Raja Ratnakara, and when Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati visited the king of Tripura with his father, king was so impressed by his intelligence and his character that he immediately offered him a job. So he stayed and he worked on this book. And then a year later the king died, and the new king, who was the prince, immediately engaged Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati in training his own children, the new princes, in morality and the scriptures and the religion. And he remained employed, but he didn't stop only there. He noticed some money embezzlement and some theft in the royal palace. Different people were using the king. So he brought this to the king's attention. King investigated, fired all of these people because it was true, and gave him so much power. Later on, after 10 years, when Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati was leaving king's service in order to focus solely on spiritual life and preaching, Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati was king's envoy in Kolkata by this time, something like a consul or an ambassador. And king left Tripura and came to Kolkata. Now, for those of you who know the map of India, present-day Kolkata in West Bengal, and then there's Bangladesh towards the east, and then on the other side of Bangladesh there's Tripura. So quite a long journey, especially in those days. So king traveled from Tripura to Kolkata to persuade him not to go. But Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati already had his mission chalked out. So then he decided to chant 1 billion of the holy names of Krishna. So for 9 years, he focused only on chanting, mostly all day long, just chanting. Sleeping on the floor in a small hut in Mayapur and worshipping one deity of Lord Chaitanya. Sometimes he would make small break while still chanting and go around and do some other engagements, but for 9 years he stayed there and he chanted before this deity. He slept on the floor, ate simply, I think he ate only khichdi. And then his preaching mission started. He acquired a lot of books, an entire small library, about 2,000 titles for his research and writing. Although he was writing earlier, now he really took off. He took sannyas, he became a swami, he accepted first disciples, and then his mission really started. He traveled all over India. Officially he opened 64 temples. In how many? He started in 1918. In 18 years he opened 64 temples. So basically that's an average of 4 temples per year. And all over British India, majority of temples were in Bengal, but somewhere he had a temple in Delhi, temple in Bombay, in Naimisharanya, in Patna, in Prayagraj, Allahabad back then, Chennai, back then called Madras. And he opened a few temples outside of India. He opened one in Burma. And then he sent 3 disciples to preach in London. So there was a temple for the time being in London. And then they opened a preaching center in Berlin. He initiated, all of his disciples were mostly Bengalis. And his institution's name was Gaudiya Math, which literally translated to English means Bengali temple. Gaudiya, from Gauda, meaning Bengal, Bengali. Math means temple, Bengali temple. And he preached mostly, his preaching appealed mostly to the Indian or Bengali intelligentsia. He attracted really smart people and really capable people. He initiated about 4 or 5 people by letter in London, and he initiated one German gentleman. As per some stories of senior devotees who were distributing books in former Yugoslavia before it fell apart, apparently he may have initiated 2 people, 2 young men from Montenegro. Now, it's my desire to put some ads in Montenegro newspaper and try to find grandchildren or great-grandchildren of these people who may or may not still have some books, some picture. some japa beads. But this would be a really, really significant and important historical information. For now, it's just a story that has no substance in reality. It may be, it may not be. But it's worth looking into it. And even if it's a dead-end street, then we know it's a dead-end street. No problem. Two German gentlemen from Berlin came to see him in Kolkata. One was a baron. He was an aristocrat. He stayed for a short while and returned to Germany, but this other gentleman, whose name was Eric or Erwin von Schulze, he stayed. He accepted initiation from Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati, and he spent most of his remainder of his life in India. He returned only some years before he died. He returned to Germany and died there. And he wrote quite a lot. So what else can we say about Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati? Besides these 64 temples, the monks, standard temples where monks lived, he also opened 3 Prapana ashrams, which were basically the homes of his married couples, from where the preaching was going on. As a matter of fact, one of the magazine in Assamese was printed from the house of one of his married disciples. Now, Srila Prabhupada was his disciple, but Srila Prabhupada's biological sister was also Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati's disciple. I don't know what was her birth name, but her initiated name was Bhavatarini Devidasi. And all ISKCON devotees, Srila Prabhupada's disciples, called her Pishima, which they called her and referred to her as Pishima, which means auntie, father, sister. And even now, other generations would be, grandfather, sister. I guess in Bengali you have all of these names for all of these functions. Generally, in the Indian languages you have all of these. I guess we have even in other languages. I have a friend from Boston who earned his PhD dissertation just on these names and linguistics of it. Devotee friend. But we do have more than we know, but in Indian languages it's more detailed and it's more complex. You cannot say my cousin, which first cousin, second cousin, first cousin from the mother's sister's side, from the mother's brother's side, from the father's sister's side, from the father's brother's side. You cannot just say cousin. And you cannot just say grandma, because there's different name from maternal grandmother and paternal grandmother. In Bengali, paternal grandmother is Takuma, and maternal grandmother is Didima. Didima. So Srila Prabhupada's sister was also, when Srila Prabhupada was getting initiated in November 1932 by Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati, it was a custom that wife also accepts the initiation and practices Krishna consciousness. Unfortunately, Srila Prabhupada's wife was always utterly unsupportive in his spiritual pursuit, and she not just didn't want to take the initiation, but she didn't want even to attend the ceremony. That was in Allahabad, Prayagraj, in November 1932. Imagine you're married and your marital partner studies something, works on a PhD dissertation, something that you're not interested in. I don't know, today we met one Indian lady here, she's doing her PhD dissertation in physics. And imagine if she were married and then, she's there's a ceremony of her receiving the diploma and the title and everything. And her husband said, that's your thing, I don't want to go there. No, how about a little bit of emotional support to your partner? But Srila Prabhupada's wife, no, she stayed at home, drank tea, and ate tea cookies. That was it. So she missed a great opportunity. She could have been Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati's disciple. What else can we say about Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati? Let me see. Okay, let's just, for a few minutes, just talk about him. Two of them met for the first time. Then we'll mention he's leaving this world. So in 5 minutes we'll finish. So in 1922 in Kolkata, Srila Prabhupada was 24 years old. He just had his first child, a son, a year earlier. And he worked for the famous Bose laboratories. Mr. Bose was a famous Indian chemist, a scientist of that time. He was a manager because Srila Prabhupada studied chemistry. And one of his close friends was Narendranath Malik. And Narendranath was also from an aristocratic family, so one of the sannyasis, disciples of Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati, visited him at home, collecting alms, donations for the temple, and they gave a substantial donations, as they do. And he invited them, come please visit us in the temple. So Narendranath didn't want to go alone, and as our Srila Prabhupada was kind of an authority among his friends because he was smart and learned, he didn't want to go alone. He said, come, there's this holy man, let's go and see him. He said, no, this holy man, what's the English word? A dime by the dozen. You get a dozen, a 12 for a dime, 25 cents. My father had them every day. They just, want to fill their belly, and they not holy persons at all. But no, this one is different. Come. And he literally pulled him and pushed him, and they went there. So they came to the temple in Kolkata, which was first temple on a rented location. The address was Ultadanga Junction Road number 1. And they greeted Narendranath because they knew him, and they immediately escorted him to the second floor, actually to the roof. First floor, then the roof. In the corner of the roof there was a small room where Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati was staying when he was in Kolkata, and there he was speaking with some guests and devotees, and Srila Prabhupada and Narendranath came in and paid obeisances on the floor, and as they were getting up, Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati looked at them and he said, you two are educated young men. Why don't you preach the message of Lord Chaitanya all over the world in English language? And Srila Prabhupada, who at that time was the follower of Mahatma Gandhi, as a matter of fact, 2 years earlier, Mahatma Gandhi started his first attempt on the non-cooperation movement, because that was 1920. In late 1919, there was I never can pronounce the name properly, Jallianwala Bagh massacre, where an English officer ordered his soldiers to shoot at the unarmed group of religious Sikhs in Punjab, and he killed hundreds of them, men, women, children. He didn't go to prison. They sent him back to England, and years later one Indian revolutionary went there, became his servant, and killed him. But incited by this useless, irreasonable violence by the British, Gandhi some months later started his first attempt at the non-cooperation movement, and it went on for 2 years. And in the early 1922, Gandhi was arrested, and he spent another few years, 2, 3, or 4 years in prison. I don't remember exactly. And Srila Prabhupada became the follower of Mahatma Gandhi. He was dressed in khadi and everything that went with the following Gandhi's non-cooperation movement at that time. So when Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati told him, why don't you preach message of Lord Chaitanya all over the world, he said, who's going to hear us? We are an enslaved nation. First we have to gain our freedom, our independence, Swaraj. And Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati told him, do you really think that the transcendental message depends on political situation? And then they had a debate that went on for some time. And Srila Prabhupada lost, of course. Then as they were leaving, they got some prasadam, and as they were walking back home through the streets of Kolkata, his friend Narendra asked him, so, what do you think? And Srila Prabhupada was smiling. He was happy that he was defeated. He said, I think that the message of Lord Chaitanya is in really capable hands. From that day on, Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati was in his heart, and Srila Prabhupada would visit the temple occasionally. He befriended some of the swamis from the temple, and he most probably did see Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati somewhere. It is not known if they had any exchange. But a year later, in 1923, Srila Prabhupada moved with his family to Allahabad, known back then, now back with his own name, Prayagraj. And the same name, he got a daughter, his second child. He was, for Bose Laboratories, he was running the business there for the entire state of Uttar Pradesh, which was back then known as the United Provinces. And he was thinking about Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati, but he lost all contact. But 5 years later, when the preachers came to prepare the grounds for the preaching on Kumbh Mela festival, he reconnected, and from that day on he was an active member who was supportive financially, bringing people to donate money. He was doing services, he was singing, playing. He became learned. In 1932 he got initiated, but then we fast forward to the very end of the manifest pastimes of Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati, December 1936. He was ill. He was staying for some months in Jagannath Puri. His heart was not well. And in the late November, Srila Prabhupada wrote him a letter from, at that time Srila Prabhupada was living in Mumbai, Bombay. And he wrote him a letter that you have so many disciples who are dedicated to serving you, sannyasis, brahmacharis, but I'm a married man, have wife, children, business to run. How can I serve you? And Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati replied on the 3rd of December from Jagannath Puri. I believe you can become a really nice English preacher, and that would be good for you and for those whom you preach to. If you ever get money, print books. And this was the first instruction he gave him, and he repeated throughout their communication during these 14 and a half years. And now the final instructions is preach in English, print books. And Prabhupada, and then on the 6th of December, Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati goes to Kolkata, and there he left in the early morning hours of the 1st of January 1937 at 5:30 in the morning in Bagh Bazar Gaudiya Math Temple, at that time the most beautiful temple of Kolkata, with white marble. It's still there. In the city where his father left more than 20 years earlier. And the moment he left this world, all the clocks in the temple stopped. They just stopped. They still keep some of that clocks in the temple. His room is there, his bed is there, some of his items that he used are there. And then they organized the train to take his body to Mayapur, the whole train. And I don't know for how many hours they carried his body on a palanquin throughout the streets of Kolkata while singing and dancing, having kirtan. They blocked all the traffic. They came to railway station, boarded the train with his body, and chanting for a few hours, they reached Navadvip. They crossed Ganga, and they were in Mayapur. And Mayapur back then was a barren land. There were only 2 temples there. Down there in the distance, there was Yogapith temple that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati built some years earlier, the appearance place of Lord Chaitanya. And some distance behind it was Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati's head temple called Sri Chaitanya Mat. And his body was going to be entombed there. And they got off the boat and followed the small footpath, and they passed over the land that is today ISKCON, ISKCON's headquarters in Mayapur, Yogapith, and they entombed his body in a big grand festival. Unfortunately, his final instructions were not followed by his leading disciples, so within the first 2 years there was a big chasm and conflict, and his institution fell apart. They sued each other in the court, and 10 years later, just before the British left India and the court case was over after, I don't know, 8-9 years in British court, 600 pages of papers, and his institution was broken into 2 pieces and already fell apart even before that. Our Srila Prabhupada was really dissatisfied with that, and although he was a family man and had nothing officially to do with the institution, he was always preaching about unity and following the preaching mood of their spiritual master, but no one did anything about that. And until Srila Prabhupada, he even asked them for help so he could go to the West. They turned him down. So he went the other way. He got a nation, came to the West, and we know when he landed, when he came by steamship in the Boston Harbor and passed through customs and immigration, and he saw the city a little bit. Captain took him in a taxi, and he came on the boat. He wrote a song offering praise to Krishna and to his spiritual master Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati. He said, if such an exalted spiritual master said that the mission of Lord Chaitanya is going to spread worldwide, then it's going to happen. I don't know why you brought me here, Krishna, to this horrible place. America, what a horrible, everybody wants to go to America, but he says, I don't know why you brought me to this horrible place. People are under influence of the lower modes of nature, passion and ignorance. But you must have brought me here for some reason. I'm just a puppet in your hands, and just as a puppeteer makes the doll dance, the puppet dance, so make me dance, my Lord, make me dance, dance, my Lord, make me dance. Srila Prabhupada spoke often about his spiritual master, glorified him, reflected upon their meetings. A beautiful transcendental love story